Hi, everybody. My name is Moshe Lerman. I am the reports coordinator at Sellercloud, and I've been with Sellercloud for about 5 years now. In this presentation, we're going to go through 5 sections. First, we'll discuss how Sellercloud gets your data into reporting data, live data versus P&L data, how to generate that data, and then I'm going to give a basic overview of the reports categories. And then we're going to go through a small tutorial on how to use date types in Sellercloud and how to search reports using the different date type options. Number one, in this section, we're going to go through live data versus P&L data. First, I'm going to show you how your data transforms into reports. The second thing is we're going to go through which reports are the exception to the general rule of reports data versus live data, and which reports actually report based on live data. And finally, we're going to go through a review question based on this to illustrate the point. First, I'm going to show you this graphic to give you an idea of basically the way it works in Sellercloud is you go through all your operational activities where you're shipping, you're tracking your inventory and viewing your incoming orders. All that happens in the main Sellercloud operational modules. Then what happens is we take that data, we generate that data to a separate part of the database into a sort of data warehouse, which then ultimately we retrieve that data when you go to your reporting. The reason we do this is for two main reasons. One is that we can structure your data in a reports-friendly way so that it's easier to present that data to you in a profit and loss format and in the format that you need for your reports. The second reason is so that it doesn't interfere with the performance of your operational activities. So by separating that into a separate part of the database, we improve performance that way. Now, there are some exceptions to this rule. You'll see over here, you have your order report section and your inventory report section. Those have options to show live data. We have in your order report section the ability to show live data, incoming orders, unshipped orders. So basically, what happens is when we transform that data, it happens once you ship your order. And then overnight, the process to generate that data into reports happens overnight. So if you just shipped an order today, or if your order is not shipped yet, it will not show up in the regular reports because it's still existing in your live database. So we have two report sections that are exceptions to this rule. And that's the order report section and the inventory report section. The inventory reports, it gives you, obviously, you want to see your actual inventory currently. You want to see what your inventory levels are. And then your order reports, it gives you the ability to see unshipped orders and your, and let's say canceled orders and all that kind of stuff in a reporting format. But the rest of the categories the orders need to be shipped, and if they were shipped today, you still won't see them in reports because this process happens overnight. So here's a common question that I get when people go to reports and they say, how many orders did I have in the last week? Oftentimes they'll go back to the manage orders page and they'll say, well, I thought I had more orders. Why? I was looking at the manage orders page. It's the same. I ran the same date range. So what's the difference? So over here, you'll see that the date range is for today on the manage orders page, and there's no filter for shipped orders or for the fact that it was shipped before today, which is why when you go to the profit by order summary report, for example, you will not see these orders because they have not been generated yet for report data. So as a general rule, what you're going to want to look at, if you see that the number of orders on your manage orders page do not match what you have in reports, you're going to want to look at one, am I matching up the date types, first of all? Because on your manage orders page, the default is to run it by order date, the date that the order was placed. And most of the reports, the default is to run it by ship order. So that's one part of it. The second thing is to check whether the order is shipped. And the third thing is to check that it was shipped before today. If all those things qualify, if you put in filters for all those things on the manage orders page, then the number of orders in your reports should match. Now that we discussed how we have a separate part of the database for reports, let's move on to how you can generate this data into reports manually if you need to. So first, I'd like to introduce to you the P&L tab and how you can navigate to the P&L tab. Many of you probably know about this, but if you go to your toolbox on your Manage Orders page, you can reach the P&L tab where it shows you a P&L summary of your order, broken down into certain fields, and then you see the profit on the bottom. On the P&L tab, there is an option. You see this green circle at the top, where you can regenerate profit and loss. So if, let's say, you get a refund that comes in, or you issue a refund on an order, and you want to see the updated profit margin on the order, then what you'll do is you go ahead and you click regenerate profit and loss, and it will regenerate the order. Now, I would note this only works if the order is shipped, or if the order has already reports data existing. So what you're doing is you're saying, let's regenerate it, but you can't initially generate it from this tab, from individual orders. Next, I'm going to show you here, you can update P&L in bulk. Let's say there's a number of refunds, or you received a whole bunch of returns for a number of different orders, and you want to see that the updated profit for all those orders in one shot. You go to the Manage Orders page, you select all the orders based on your date range that you ran, and then you can go to the actions and search for Generate Profit and Loss, and that will update. We'll start a job to update all the P&L on the orders. And once the job is finished, then the profit and loss should be updated on those orders. Next, I'm just going to give you just a general overview of the reports categories, and I'm going to emphasize one thing that can be confusing to a lot of people is we have a number of different sections that cover sales orders. So how do you differentiate between the sales order reports and how to use them? See here, there's the profit and loss section, which this gives you a detailed breakdown of your profit and loss, your expenses, and everything that goes into what you need to calculate your profit. Sales has generally a focus, the sales report section has a focus on quantity sold and how to track the performance of your products and the sales of your products. The focus is different than your profit and loss. So if you're looking to run actual reports to see your profit, you would probably want to go to the profit and loss. There's a lot more options with that. And then you have your order section, as I told you, that you can use for live orders. And then the transaction report section, that is focused on auditing transactions for like accounting and trails and that kind of thing. It's a breakdown of the transaction details. It gives you some details about that transaction and with a focus on that. And then the rest of them are pretty much as their titles. I want to go through date ranges. So in this section, I'm going to first define the different date types, and then I'm going to show you how to run reports using the different date types, and show you an example of running a report by order date, running a report by ship date, and then understanding the differences between the two, and then how to use transaction date in reports, which is a complex topic in and of itself. So here I put together a little chart to show you and to define the different date types. So obviously order and ship are what they represent. when you're searching, these are the order events you're searching for. So when you search by order date, you're searching for all orders that fall within this date range that they were placed within this date range. And that means, and there's only one order date per order. So all the data relating to this order will show up in that record. So even if you have something in a transaction that happened at a later date, it will show up on the record, on the report that you run. And I'll show you an example of that in a second. And then you have shape, and then you have transaction. Now, transaction date is the date of an exchange of funds or assets. And these can have multiple. And you can use this date to sort of isolate specific transactions on an order. And examples of this would be ship, refund date, return date, an adjustment date, or a reimbursement. Let's say you added something onto an order. First, obviously, you'll see this is what we're referring to when we say date types. This is the date type filter. Again, like I said, by default, on a lot of these orders, it won't even show up as ship, but it's by default, it runs by ship because that's the initial transaction that we consider on an order. Next, over here, I have an example of an order. You see this order there's the order date was on 6/13, and the ship date was on January 15th. Over here, you see this is the full data on the order. It had payments of $389, refund, an adjustment, which came up to a final profit of $87.93. So when you run it by order date over here, you see it shows up 6/13. I ran it for the date of the order, and the order shows up. Now I run it by ship date, and it's on June 15th. I run it for the day that it was shipped, and I filter for this order, the order will show up. You'll see on the top screenshot, the date is run is January 13th to January 13th, and then the date type is order, right? That falls within the date range of the order date. On the bottom one, you see there's no records. What's the reason for that? If you go to the date type filter, you see it's the ship date. So if you're running it, the end date on this date range filter is 6/13, which is before the ship date, so you're not going to get the record even though it was ordered on June 13th. On the bottom one, you'll see there's no records because you did it by date type order from date 6/15, and the order date falls outside the date range. Okay, now, how do you use transaction date as a date type? This is where the real meat of this presentation is. You see here I have I put together a timeline of the full life cycle of this order. The order was placed on June 13th, was paid on June 15th and shipped that same day, and then was reimbursed later on by Amazon on August 17th, and then a refund was issued on August 31st. That's the full life cycle of this order. So you see at the bottom, you see the date over here is from June 15th to September 1st, which encompasses all the dates on the order. You see at the bottom, there's, I highlighted the refund column. There's a refund for $172.92, and the cash profit is $87.93. And then I go to the next one, and the refund is gone. And the cash profit just jumped up. What happened here? The answer is that the date range that I put in only encompassed transactions until August 17th. And excluded the last date on this timeline. So this happens, what you can do you can flip this around if you want to just see, let's say, the adjustment or the refund, because let's say you ran a monthly profit and loss report, which I get a lot. I've heard from a lot of people who they're running their reports by ship date, and they're wondering why the refund gets backdated to the report. And the answer is simply because ship date associates all the order data with the original ship date. If you want to isolate specific profits and you're running a monthly profit report, you're going to want to do it by transaction date. So that way you book your profit for June in June, and then now you're dealing with the adjustments of the refund and the reimbursement from Amazon in August separately. And that's how you do it with transaction date. Finally, I want to discuss one of the biggest questions that I get is, number one, using accrual or cash. And actually, oftentimes this is not an actual question that I get from people, but it's an assumption that people have since they run their books by accrual, which is what most people do, that Sellercloud accrual is the same thing, and that you should use that. So over here we have on reports, there's an option called accounting basis. There's a filter where you can filter, where you can set how you're running your report. What's the basis, the accounting basis you're using to run your reports. In accounting, accrual has like a lot of different elements that relate to the principles of accrual. There's the matching principle, and then there's accrued revenue. So what we did in Sellercloud is we don't have a fully encompassing accounting environment to replicate every element of accounting. So we borrowed the term of accrual to use for scenarios where your order is unpaid, so that you can calculate your profit for unpaid orders. Now in Sellercloud, most of the time this is not relevant because you can't ship out an order unless it's paid, with few exceptions. So generally, and then what happens is accrual has some gaps, which I'm going to go into in a later presentation, because of how we consider the profit. There are some gaps in Sellercloud. So I would strongly suggest that unless you absolutely have to use accrual, that you use cash. That is the more accurate way of running reports in Sellercloud. Finally, this is also a very common question I get from clients when they're trying to run their profit and loss for, let's say, a summarized per month. So they run a summarized report on Amazon, right? And they get a certain number, and they come back to Sellercloud, and they like, the number is not even close. Look what's going on here. There's a number of things to consider. What I just displayed for you before, that timeline regarding transactions and how there's a number of different transactions that could happen within the life cycle of an order. There's to consider apples to apples, to compare apples to apples, a report on your channel versus a report in Sellercloud. You have to make sure to isolate the parameters that are being used to run that report on the channel. So you have, sometimes you can be running an order, the channel automatically runs the order based on when the order was placed and paid for. In Sellercloud, the default is to run it by ship date. You get a completely different set of orders. Then the question is, how are they considering refunds? Are they just giving you a report on your performance and not deducting the refunds? Are they deducting the refunds at a later date? Are they deducting it in the month of the report that you're running it for? So all those things need to be considered. One other thing that I found, and this should usually balance out technically, but there is a small difference. Let's say, for example, Amazon has all their dates based on Pacific time. And Sellercloud translates those times into the time zone of the server, which for most of you would probably be Eastern time zone. So that's a difference of 3 hours. So if you got a whole bunch of orders between 9 p.m. and 12 a.m. on February 29th, on Amazon it will show in the February report, and then in Sellercloud it will show as March 1st. So, I mean, technically that usually should balance out, because on the flip side of it, on the other end of the date On the other end of the date range, it's also 3-hour difference, so they technically should balance out. But the point is to think about things in terms of what are the parameters that are being used to include data in this report. How am I deciding what to include in this report? What orders am I including? And think about all the different elements when you are running a summary report. Thank you.